Hey, this is Lee Waller and welcome. In this video, I am working with Unreal Engine's motion design tools. I'm going to take a look at creating and working with 2D and 3D shapes. I want to explain a little bit about the significance of these 2D and 3D shapes. They're considered parametric shapes, which mean that they have parameters that you can use to adjust their size and shape. Each shape will have different parameters based on its original form. 2D shapes are exactly that. They're just flat 2D shapes made up on the X and the Y axis. 3D shapes are made up on the X, Y, and Z axis. In their original form, 2D and 3D shapes are not considered meshes. They don't have geometry, but they can be converted into meshes. 2D and 3D shapes are also unique in the fact that they can use modifiers to be adjusted into new shapes. I'm going to go ahead and delete all of these objects in the scene, and we'll jump into creating the shapes. Over here in the motion design toolbox, you'll see the 2D shapes and 3D shapes. Right now I'm in the 2D tab, and to create any of these, just double click on the object you want, and you'll see that a default shape is dropped into the viewer. That shape is also listed over here in the motion design outliner. There's that rectangle, and by selecting that, in the details panel, you'll see all of the properties that I can adjust for this shape. Of course, we have the default location, rotation, and scale. I can change the location of this object. I can rotate it. And then also if I want to scale it. I'm going to reset all of those real quick. And below that, you'll see the material options. I'm going to come back to that in just a couple of minutes. But I want to jump on down to the shape properties. This is where we can do most of the work to build out the shape. You'll see that the size type right now is being measured in Unreal units. If you're more familiar with pixels, you can choose pixels. The Unreal unit is in centimeters. We have the ability to constrain or deconstrain these two properties, the X and Y axis. So when they're constrained together, if I adjust one, it adjusts the other. Or if I want to adjust them separately, I can click on the drop down, set that to free, and then I can adjust these separately. We can also uniform scale those. And then we can adjust the alignment, which is the pivot point right here, where we want that to be placed on the object. Or I can set that back to center. I'm going to adjust the width of this just a little bit, and we can slant the sides of this. So if I want a certain degree of a slant on this, let's say 33 on both, you'll see that I can create a skewed look with this. It's also nice that we can adjust them separately. I'm going to reset those back, and then we have the global bevel size. What that refers to on a flat 2D shape is the rounding of our corners. And so if I adjust the global bevel size, all four corners will be rounded the same. I'm going to set that to 30. The global bevel subdivisions is the amount of resolution we have in this curve. So if I set this down to 2, you'll see that we have less of a curve and more of an angle. I can also set those separately by going into any one of the four corners here and adjusting that. So if I want a straight edge on one of them, you can see that I can set that down to 0 and I have a straight 90-degree angle there. The rest of them are still curved. I'll close that up, and one other option that I will use often is in the lighting, and this is cast shadows. I know we can't see it right now, but I just want to make mention of that if you do not want an object to cast shadows, you can come down here to lighting and deselect that. So let's take a look at materials for this shape. Here in the materials tab, you'll see that we have the material type. Right now it's set to simple, and we can choose whether we want it to be a solid or a linear gradient. And then we can choose the color. We can also select whether we want this to be lit by the lighting in the scene or to be unlit. Right now, we don't have much lighting in the scene, but it is being affected by that lighting. And so you'll see a slight change when I choose Use Unlit Material. you'll see now that we're getting a more true representation of this color. It doesn't mean that this is not a true representation. It just means that this is being affected by the lighting. So you have the option to go with an unlit material. Our other options under material type, we have asset. I can choose an asset that may be a material that I've created or a texture that's been created and imported into Unreal Engine. I'll select this option here and I'll scroll through and I'll just use this blue color right here. So now I have applied this material that was already in Unreal Engine and applied it to the shape. Again, you can create these, you can import these, they can be textures and they can be materials. Our third option on this is the new material designer. I'm going to select it and our material designer opens up. I'll go over this in more detail in another tutorial, but to demonstrate quickly, I'm going to select this material option right here and I'm going to go to a solid color, click on my color picker there and I'll change the color there and hit OK. And now I'll close this out and you can see that we've applied that material to the shape. One issue that you need to be aware of with these 2D shapes is that this material that I've applied to it is a one-sided material. This is a bit different than if you're working in something like After Effects where you don't deal with one-sided or two-sided materials. You just apply the color to the shape and it's on both sides. What I mean by that, let me rotate this around. You'll see this is the front side right here. And if I rotate this around, when we go to the back side, that material is not showing up. It's a one-sided material. So this can be an issue. To fix it, we will choose the material designer and open up the material designer by clicking on Edit with Material Designer. It brings this back open and there's a little hidden menu right here that I'm going to go to. I'm going to click on it. And I'm going to jump down to Open in Unreal Engine Material Editor. Here you'll see all of the nodes that makes up this material. I'm not going to worry about going into details on this. What we need to be aware of is this little option right here to the left side. It says two-sided. Select that and then apply and save this. And we can close this out. And now that material is two-sided and it'll show up on both sides of the shape. So let's take a look at some of the other shapes. I'm going to delete that rectangle and now I'll jump into an ellipse, double click on that, and you'll see a lot of the same properties in the details panel for this ellipse that we had for the rectangle. You'll see location, rotation, and scale. There's our material options. And then down here, slightly different in our shape options, you'll see that we have our size type and whether we want that constrained or deconstrained, whether we want to scale that up or down. And the next option there, sides, is the number of sides that are being used to create this ellipse. I'll drag this down quite a bit and you'll see that I'm down to 8 sides. And so it's kind of the resolution of this ellipse. So right now we have just 8 sides on it. Oftentimes 32 might be enough. If you want more resolution, you can jump on up to 64 and it will go up as high as 128 sides on the resolution. We have an angle degree and a start degree. We'll adjust that and you can see that we can create a pie shape with this. And then we can also adjust, let me set that to 270, and we can then also adjust where this angle is. All of that can be animated or set static. Let's move to the next shape. I'll delete the ellipse and we'll go to the regular polygon. We have our transform options, our material options, and down here on the shape, the big option that we want to take a look at is the number of sides. You can see right now it's set to 5. We can bring this all the way down to 3 for a triangle, and you can adjust that on up. You'll get to a point where it turns into a circle. I'll bring that back down to 5. And like we did earlier on our rectangle, you'll see that we have a bevel size and we can adjust that and round those corners. And again, the subdivisions there if you want to adjust that. We'll move on to the next shape, and that is the freehand tool. And before I start using the freehand tool, I am going to come down here and I'm going to turn on these grids. And you'll see that show up in just a moment. Most of the time I work without those grids. I'll select the freehand tool, come over here into the viewer, and then I'll just start clicking points. So if I want to line up to the grid, I have that option. Or if I want to trace something in the scene, I can also do that. And I'll just start creating a shape. All I'm doing is clicking one point, moving to the new location, and then clicking that point. I am going to close this out by clicking the first point there. And now I've created this shape here. In my motion design outliner, I'll select that freehand shape right there. And you'll see in the details panel, again, transform properties, material properties. And down here underneath shape, these properties are going to be a bit different. We can adjust the roundness or the bevel of these corners. And you'll also see that if I hover over the object, that we have these little circles in the corners. I can select those, and it takes a little bit of work to get them. But once I've selected one, I can drag on that, and you'll see that I can adjust the beveling of that individual corner. That's a little bit quicker way of doing it. I can also go to these corners, and it might take a little bit of work, but you can get this gizmo here, and then you can adjust that point separately. You will also see that you'll be presented with this grayed out little circle right here. Right now, this is not a point, but if I click on it, I've now created a new point in that shape. And I can grab it and I can adjust it however I want to, and if I want to round that corner also. So there's a lot of options in reshaping this. All of these points do begin to show up in the details panel. So if you're having a little bit of a difficulty working with them there, you can drop down here into the details panel and you'll see our points right there. You can jump into each point and take a look at it. So if I want to adjust the location of this first point, you see that I have my options for the X and Y position there, and then also the corner options for that. So if I want to bevel it separately. So this is a very good option for creating customized shapes. I'm going to delete that, and we'll jump to the next one, which is the ring. Double click on that. I'm going to go ahead and turn my grids off, and let's look at the properties for this. I'm just going to drop down to the shape properties here. You'll see again that we have a sides option for this. So if I do want to bring this down, I can bring it all the way down to make a triangle. If I want to keep it as a ring, I can bring that back up to 64 sides. That's a very good resolution for a ring or circle or ellipse. The inner size of it is this inner ring right here. So if I bring this down, you'll see that the size of this ring increases. Or if I bring this all the way up, it'll stop at 0.99 and is a very thin ring. Let me bring that on down. I'll set that back to 0.8. And then again, much like our ellipse that we had earlier, we have the angle degree option, which allows us to open up this ring. And then we can also set the degree to which that starts. All of that can be animated. Let's take a look at the star shape. I'll double click on it. Much like the regular polygon, it has an option for points rather than sides. So we can bring that on down to 2, looks like a diamond, or we can increase that quite a bit. I will bring up the size on this so that we can see it a little bit better. Let me drop this back down to say maybe 8 sides, and we'll work with this inner size fraction right here. You'll see as I decrease it, all of the points moving closer to the center. And then as I increase it, they push out further to the edge. And then if I want to bevel those, round those, I can do that also. And so you can work with this and get some interesting shapes. After the star, we have an arrow. We have a few options on adjusting this. You'll see the line there. We can either increase or decrease the length of the line. You'll also see the height of the line can be increased or decreased. And then the position of the point of the arrow can be adjusted, as well as the position of the line. You can also select to have the arrow on both sides. We'll delete that and move on to the chevron. There's not a lot to work with on this, but you can adjust the thickness of that chevron. After our chevron, we have the line option. I'll select it and draw 2 points. In our details panel here, you'll see that we have our shape options. We can increase and decrease the width of the line. Let me set that back to 3. And then on our vector options here, that is what creates the line. So I can adjust those, the length of it, or this angle here. I can also adjust these by going to the line and selecting these little points right here. It takes a little bit of work to get them just right. Once you have them, you'll get this handle that you can move this around with to reshape the line in the direction that you want it to go. If you have a good amount of thickness to this, you can also bevel the edges. All right, so we've taken a look at all the 2D shapes. Let's jump into the 3D shapes. In the 3D shapes here, you'll see that we have a cube, a sphere, a cone, and a torus. Let's start with the cube. So I'll double click on the cube. It places our cube in the scene. You'll see our transform properties there, location, rotation, and scale. You'll see under materials that now we have a material option, and I'm going to rotate this just a little bit so that you can see our cube. We have a material option for every side of this cube, so there will be 6 options for materials. So each side of the cube can get its own material. I'll drop down to the shape properties for this and make sure that that is set to free. And you'll see that we can adjust the X, Y, and Z values of this cube. We also have the uniform scale size there. And then when we bevel this, it's not going to only bevel the corners, but it's going to bevel along these edges. So I'll bring that up to say 6. You can see now that we've beveled this edge. And so we can see that a little bit better. I'm going to jump out of our camera and I'm going to zoom in. And you can see that those corners have been beveled along with the edges. Let's take a look now at a sphere. I'll delete the cube, come over here to the sphere and double click on it. And there are our transform options. Again, location, rotation, and scale. We have one material option for this right now. I'll take a look at the difference in our shape options down here. We can work with the start longitude degree. I'm going to just go ahead and set that to 90. And it has moved the top of our sphere down to the center point. Let me rotate this just a little bit. And you'll see that we have half a sphere there. And then you'll also notice that we now have 2 separate materials. Let me just change the color of those so that we can see their effect on the sphere. And so one is for the center of it and one is for the outside of it. I'll go back to our shape properties and I'll set this back to 0. And the UI is jumping all over the place as I adjust these. That's why I'm trying not to slide these. I'm assuming that this is a glitch with the UI. So I'll adjust this 180 down and you can see that that is jumping all over the place. And again, let me go back up to rotation. And there we have, again, that option for that second material. Set this back up to 180. And I'll adjust the latitude degree first. I'll set this to 180. And it, on the latitude, cuts our sphere in half. And we can adjust where that begins and ends by adjusting the start latitude degree. Go ahead and select it, delete it, and we'll take a look at the cone. Double click on its options. We have the transform properties. You'll see right now that we have 2 material options. One will be for the main part of the cone and one will be for the bottom side of it. I'll go to the shape properties. Of course, this cone is made up of the bottom radius and the top radius, which right now is at 0 and is a point. We can go to the top radius ratio there and increase that. And we can increase that all the way up to 1. And of course, we have a cylinder. And then we can bring that back in based on what we're trying to create there. When I do that, we've been given another material option. One for the main part of the cone, one for the bottom, and one for the top of the cone. I'm going to adjust this angle degree, but my UI is jumping all over the place. So let me set that to 180. Bring this back, and then we can adjust the start degree on this. You'll see that now that cone is circulating around that 360 degrees there. All right, we'll delete that cone, and last option there is the torus. Double click on it, and we'll jump into the properties for it. One material option for it right now. And the number of slices affects the resolution of the torus. Let me drag that on down, and you'll see that we can bring this to the point of a triangle. I'll bring that back up to 32. And then the sides affects the diameter of the pipe. So we'll bring that down. That's a little more difficult to see. Let me rotate this. So you can see that we're down to 4 sides on that pipe that is creating the torus. Let me jump back into our camera and reset our torus. And we'll look at our other options. Bring that back up to 32. And then the inner size, this is very similar to the ring that we had earlier. You can see that we can make that a lot thicker, or we can make that a lot thinner. And just like our ring earlier, we have the angle degree and start degree. I'll adjust this a little bit. Bring this down, and then you can also see that with that start degree, we can rotate that. I hope this look at creating 2D and 3D shapes in Unreal Engine's motion design tools has been helpful. For more, hit the like and subscribe buttons.